Our first two presentations are by moms who have sons that have been incarcerated. They're each going to share with us their experience of living after their sons were arrested and accused of committing a violent crime. Now, you and I know, we all know in the media, we often hear about the crime victims and the impact of crime on the survivors and victims' families, and well, we should. And their experience, the experience of the victims and the victims' families, touches our humanity, evokes our compassion, and motivates our impulse for justice to be served. And at the same time, there's the families of the person being incarcerated. That's a whole nother group that are impacted by the crime. We rarely hear about that. I often watch the news myself, and as I watch a trial that's being put on the news, or I watch even the news of somebody being incarcerated, I often think about, oh my gosh, who is that person's parents, or what's their family, and what are they going through right now? So nother it's a whole nother realm that we don't, that the we're not asked to pay attention to in the world, but I think for us today, we want to draw our attention to it. And then maybe we'll draw the world's attention to it after we leave today. And that's again, the families, the children, the families of the people who were rightfully or wrongfully convicted of violent crimes. So we have two moms today to share with us what their family experienced when their sons were arrested and convicted of violent crimes. So I ask that you open your ears, open your heart, listen with compassion and humanity to the lived experience of these two moms. You're going to hear from Karen Johnson. Karen Johnson's a founding member of Prisons to Partnerships. She has a master's degree in professional counseling and credentials as a Universal Life Church reverend. Karen worked with the Prisons to Partnership founder, Neal Abramson, to develop a seminar curriculum for men recently released from prison. She's the mom of two grown children, a grandmother to three, and has one great grandchild. And her remarks today are going to be recorded. We're going to listen to her remarks that are pre-recorded. And we're also on the same recording going to hear from a second mom who's with us today, Theresa K. Theresa is a retired speech language pathologist. I guess I need one. Theresa is a retired speech language pathologist with over 40 years of experience serving individuals with complex communication and cognitive needs. She spent 17 years in hospital settings, specializing in rehabilitation for stroke and traumatic brain injuries, including 11 years as manager of speech language pathology services for a major hospital system in Ann Arbor, Michigan. She later transitioned to school-based practice, working with students with developmental disabilities. So we've combined Karen and Theresa's remarks into a single presentation entitled The Impact of Incarceration on Families of Incarcerated Individuals. So please enjoy this recording, and thank you in advance to Karen and Theresa for having put your energy into this.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming today. My name is Theresa K. I'm the mother of two adult young men, and I'm here today to talk to you about the impact of incarceration on our family.
Hello, everyone. I'm so glad that you could be here with us today. My name is Karen Johnson. I'm a mother of two grown children and a grandmother. I am a founding member of the Prisons to Partnership. I hold a master's degree in professional counseling, and I'm a reverend with the Universal Life Church. I helped develop a seminar curriculum for recently released men with Neal Abramson.
Now, my son's convictions, his first one was in 2013. He was charged, he took a plea deal and was sentenced to 3.5 to 15 years for 2 armed robberies in Michigan. Michael was addicted to heroin. He stole $100 using a fake gun. He accepted a plea deal because armed robbery can be up to life in prison. He served the 3.5 years. Fast forward to 2022, Michael was charged with aggravated murder for the accidental death of his girlfriend's 3-year-old. Michael was in jail for 21 months and had a $1.3 million bond before his trial. He was wrongly convicted and sentenced to life without parole in Ohio. And I can tell you with 100% certainty that Michael is innocent. So this focus is mostly on Michael's current incarceration.
So today I want to talk about an event in our family. In 2001, my son was just 15 years old. And I remember visiting my sister in Waco, and when I received a call from my husband, and he said that my son had been arrested for attempted murder. This is a call that changed our lives forever. He told me that our son had been arrested for attempted murder, and I just was in disbelief. I couldn't believe it. Not my son. No. How could this be happening to us? But the reality was undeniable. My son was in the detention center. He turned 16 when he was in the detention center. And so this meant he was under the juvenile court system. So we were told that since he was under the juvenile court system, he would be adjudicated as a juvenile. And adjudicated meant like a hearing before a judge, where the judge would review his background and the evidence in the case, and then the judge, would do a sentence. So we thought this was going to be a pretty smooth, straightforward process. But then we learned that the prosecutor had decided to try him as an adult. If he was tried as an adult, it could mean he could get 20 plus years. I had to take a stand for my son to not be tried as an adult. I told the lawyer that I would tell the media that the prosecutor was using my son to further her career. This threat to go to the media was one of the factors that ensured that he was tried as a juvenile. My son was ultimately sentenced to 3 years in the juvenile detention center in Giddings, Texas.
So some of the most common causes of wrongful convictions are official and systemic misconduct, police building cases without all the evidence, or outright misconduct. Prosecutors have immunity from prosecution, which leads to widespread corruption. And the judicial system, the judges can be biased, and it's very difficult to prosecute a judge for their misconduct. There's faulty forensic science. There's failures in accurate identification of perpetrators, false or misleading testimony by officials or experts, perjury and false accusations. And then police can use tactics legally to get false confessions from individuals. Inadequate defense. And then there's a disproportionate impact amongst people of color and people that have previous felonies. So all the things that are highlighted in yellow were things that we experienced with Michael's case.
Now, there are 3 things that I want to share about the impact of having an incarcerated young person, the impact to the young person and to the family. So one of the things that we found challenging was the distance to the facility. My son was in Giddings, Texas, and we lived in Dallas area. So the facility was pretty far. We traveled 400 round trip miles every weekend. We'd stay overnight in a hotel, and then plus the cost of the gas to get down there. It was quite a bit of cost. And a lot of families can't afford to do this. Even with family support, the consistent having to go consistently was a hardship. Yet being there, going on the visit, was very critical to both my son and to us. They were just so important that we went every weekend. When we couldn't go, his grandparents would go, or an aunt or uncle would go to visit him when we couldn't make it. There's this fragile lifeline between the child and their family and the outside world that the child needs, because this is a very traumatic experience for them. And like I said, some families can't afford to make the trip and they want to be there, but they can't. If the system could take into consideration the location of the family, that would be an important thing that we could work on to have happen. I feel like that's very important. Now, another difficulty that we had was the communication between us and the facility. So my son's caseworker, she would send brief updates on behaviors and tasks that he had to do for that week, but there was no details about the programs themselves. I had to call or email to get further information about what was happening. If I had not been as forceful in my interactions with the staff, I would have known very little about what was happening. On one visit, he shared that one program required him to admit he had murder in his heart when he pulled the trigger, a statement he knew was false. I had to guide him to say what the program wanted so he could progress. This entailed me having to say to my son that he would have to lie to get through the program. No parent wants to have to do that. Later, he revealed that exposure to violent images during one stage of the violent offenders program were so horrendous that after he was released, he had a PTSD response to a story told to him about a man getting shot in the face. Programs intended to rehabilitate can inadvertently harm. My son had to seek therapy to get over some of these issues. And there again, sometimes people can't afford that. They have to seek out help from their community.
There's no words to describe the depth of the shock, the trauma, helplessness, anxiety, and betrayal that you feel when your home is surrounded by state troopers. The local police lie to you and manipulate you, and you're watching your son being taken away in handcuffs to go to jail. There's frustration, fear, and anger when your loved one's medical needs are ignored and Michael has grand mal seizures. There's 7 inmates that died in 1 year due to medical causes while Michael was in jail in Ohio. We're terrified when we hear that inmates are being stabbed on a weekly basis. Gangs were running the prison, and drug use is inside the prison is the norm. We've also experienced extortion and theft that are common in prisons, and this leaves families feeling very helpless and distraught. And then in the community, you begin to feel that your friends and coworkers care about how you're coping, but they remain ambivalent about the injustice in our broken system that's causing you pain. And while my youngest son and I leaned into family and close friends, my husband withdrew from friends and family, and he was just unable to cope with the wrongful conviction of our son. He was unable to even attend his trial. There's profound grief, especially during holidays and important family events, and my heart continually breaks with Michael's absence. In the beginning, there were a lot of sleepless nights. There still are sleepless nights, but especially in the beginning when you're trying to balance everything, staying on top of legal counsel, attending court hearings, filing complaints about medical neglect, all while working full time. And the stress was just constant and consuming. During the trial, we were escorted to the back of the courtroom while the victim's family sat front and center. They were given a victim's advocate who monitored what I said during the proceedings, and this created an atmosphere of bias against our family and left an impression of guilt upon our son before the verdict was even reached.
The third thing I want to talk about is the impact on the family. Our entire family suffered. My daughter was entering 9th grade and missed the support of her brother. She missed having him there at the house. Holidays and birthdays with my family were filled with absence and grief. My husband fell into depression, and then the emotional toll on all of us was just really significant. My son's release and probation period was also difficult. Um, Decision making had been restricted during incarceration, leaving him uncertain and anxious about making decisions. He found it difficult to make the smallest decision for fear of making a mistake. The rehabilitation centered on making mistakes and then dealing with the consequences. Now, I believe that dealing with the consequences of your mistakes is a good thing if the consequences match the mistake. In the TJDC, when you made a bad decision by breaking a rule, everyone in the unit was punished. I believe this led to distrust uh, amongst them, and it had them not tell the truth. They were afraid to tell the truth.
Financial impact is also great on families. Michael's bail, again, was $1.3 million, and bail's not designed for justice, it's designed for wealth. And while we were fortunate enough to hire an attorney and expert witnesses, our own attorney, he was on his own and was ineffective. We learned that a real defense takes a team and a team takes money. And the first trial with this one attorney cost us $100,000. We're now in the process of an appeal, and to date we've spent $80,000. The Innocence Project and other innocence organizations won't take your case unless you've been through at least one appeal. Even behind bars, the costs don't stop. There's phone calls, emails, commissary, and travel costs that are right now we're spending between $400 and $500 a month. And we live in Michigan, and Michael's in prison on the border of Pennsylvania. It's a 4-hour drive away from our home, so we often drive 8 hours in one day just to avoid hotel expenses. And when a loved one's in prison, their bank accounts, taxes, and debts have to be managed. We also had to change our will. Otherwise, if my husband and I both pass away, the state of Ohio would claim Michael's inheritance. And when justice depends on money, it's not justice at all. For low-income families, survival means that they're faced with impossible choices. And it's a cycle of poverty and incarceration that keeps repeating itself. The financial strain doesn't just drain savings, it drains families, dreams, and your dignity.
In Waco, where he did his probation, he had gotten his GED when he was in the facility. And so he went to Texas State Technical College. But navigating probation and school schedules added to his stress and to our stress too.
So families and supports and resources. Keep detailed records. I like to use Google Docs to keep information organized. Reach out to innocence organizations and justice reform groups for advice and support. Do your own research. ChatGPT, Gemini Deep Research, and Claude AI are great tools for understanding legal or medical terms, writing letters, and finding resources. Learn about justice reform groups. Many can be found on LinkedIn. Prioritize your health and well-being. Tell your story because your voice matters. Involve extended family and support efforts. Have them open phone accounts, write, visit, and take turns with commissary or purchase books if they're financially able. And build community connections. Facebook, LinkedIn, local groups. Facebook has several groups from specific local prisons to state level groups and justice reform groups that you can join. And I like to attend the Prison to Partnership monthly community meetings for information and support.
I think, the probation officers themselves were good people. They were just working under us in a system that didn't allow them to use personal judgment. And so that's another area that we need to work on. It's at least in the juvenile.
I want to start with some statistics. The U.S. has the highest rate of any country of incarceration around the world. That's an annual cost of $182 billion. There's approximately 2.07 million people that are incarcerated across all systems of confinement, including state prisons, federal prisons, local jails, juvenile detention centers, etc. 1 in 7 adults has an immediate family that has been incarcerated for more than a year, and 1 in 34 has a loved one that's been confined for 10 years or more. 2.6 million, or 1 in every 28 minor children, currently have a parent incarcerated in prison or jail in the US. And studies indicate that 4 to 6% of inmates are wrongly convicted. That's 1 in every 20 criminal cases that results in a wrongful conviction.
So our goal should be to create a system that restores, not punishes, that heals, not harms. We must work to ensure that those affected by incarceration emerge as whole, resilient individuals. This is not only for the incarcerated and their families, it also helps us in our society to have people that are good citizens coming back in to create a good world for all of us. So what can we do as individuals in society to make a difference? Well, I believe change begins with involvement, whether it's donating time to visit or to write an incarcerated person, contributing to organizations like P2P, or simply raising awareness. Everyone can make a difference. Just talking about what you see as a problem and how to correct it starts a conversation for change. Together, as a community, we can turn a system that often takes from families into one that gives back.
Never stop fighting for justice and never give up hope. Thank you for listening to me today.
Wow. I said, don't want to move on right away from that. It's very impactful just listening to two moms speak. And Karen and Theresa, thank you so much. Thank you for inviting us into the privacy of your life so that we could at least try to understand what it's like for the families of the people that are arrested and convicted. It's hard. It's hard to even imagine if I haven't gone through that. I don't have a family member. It's hard. And as hard as I listen to you and as hard as I try, it's still hard to like imagine what that's like for you. But that you could share with us your grief, what it takes to try to manage the system, what it takes logistically, financially, physically for you to keep supporting your children, your sons. But here's the great thing. Here's what I'm really struck by. You could have gone under. In other words, you could have been so overwhelmed by this that you just like were trying to get your head above water all the time. And here you are, not only navigating the system for yourself, but here you are for others, like advocating for this for others, like out to make something workable, out to make a difference for families you don't even know. So that you've brought your voices, gotten, whatever that's taken, your strength, your courage to have your voice now heard for others beyond your family. I can't thank you more and acknowledge you more. Beautiful. And everybody, Theresa is here and will be in the panel at the end of the session. Thank you so much, Karen and Theresa. Thank you so much.